Welcome back. In case you haven't caught on yet, the education system is not what we've been told it is. Considering the calculated destruction of the nuclear family, at best, it's free daycare. But remember, there's no such thing as free. And at worst, it's a state-mandated indoctrination camp. Think about it. We spent 8 hours a day for 13 years. For what? To learn how to conform and blindly submit to authority. Many times we were bored to tears by uninspiring morons who regurgitated fake history. And other times we had to sit through some weird tangent about a teacher's personal problems. And you know what they didn't teach us? Practical things of actual importance. Now, do you think that was just a bit of oversight, or was it perhaps by design? Knowing what we do now, it's hard not to see it as a coordinated play to literally dumb down a society. And these globalists are going for the children because they know if you can get them into the cult while they're young, they most likely will be lifelong members. But CEO of Liberty Sentinel and author of the book Indoctrinating Our Children to Death, Alex Newman, still sees a way to save the kids and the future. And he joins us now. Alex, thanks so much for being with us today. It's great to see you on a Monday.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Allison.
Of course. Well, Alex, I would love to know what inspired you to write this book and what sort of got you going. Where did you begin with this? I know you have studied this subject for many years and you are an expert on it. So tell us what led you to want to write this.
Well, thank you, Allison. And it dawned on me over a decade ago that education was the key issue. I know it's not always the sexy issue. It's not always the one that gets the most headlines, but it is the issue on which everything else will rise or fall. If we fail on education, we're going to lose 80, maybe 90% of the next generation. And all the other battles that American patriots, God-fearing Americans are fighting, we will lose absent some sort of divine intervention, some sort of miracle. Because, and tyrants have understood this for at least 100 years, maybe longer. If you can control and shape the minds of the next generation, you will control the next generation. They will go out into politics, they'll go out into business, etc. So over a decade ago, I realized this was the most important issue of all the issues. I mean, all the other issues are important: border, guns, taxes, globalism. All these things are critical. But if we lose the children, we will lose this war. So that's why I thought, I have to write this book. I didn't write it because I wanted to. I had to, because we have a lot of people now starting to talk about this, but in my opinion, they're coming up with the wrong diagnosis. Very much like in medicine, if you have the wrong diagnosis, you're going to hurt the patient when you treat them, or at best, you're going to do nothing for them. We have to understand that the people who built this system, and you touched on this briefly in your introduction, Alison, the people who built this system always intended to turn our children away from God, away from their families, and away from their country. This is well documented. I've got the primary source documents to prove it. And so when you understand that the system is doing what it was built to do, then you realize, wow, the typical strategies of I'm going to run for school board, I'm going to lobby my state legislature, those are not going to work. We need to really ask ourselves some fundamental questions about the very basics, like what is the purpose of education?
Yeah, we sure do. And it's fascinating, especially because we're living in a day and age when we're seeing this sort of come to a head and everything is playing out that the globalists have intentionally designed to accomplish. And I know you had a fascinating interview with Alex Jones I watched recently while you were talking about your book, and you mentioned it a moment ago, but a lot of people get so distracted with all these other things that are happening, the border, the fentanyl, the attack on our rights and our freedoms, and it does all tie together, but you say it all starts in the education system at a very young age with these children. Would you elaborate more on that for us? What is the book really about? What do people need to know here?
So we start off by showing the history. And when you look back at the key characters who built this system, they actually wanted to dumb down the population. They wanted to indoctrinate Americans. So you had this very bizarre collaboration between actual communists who believed in dumbing down the population because they'd be easier to control and manipulate, and super capitalists, alleged, like the Rockefeller dynasty, that just wanted worker drones. They didn't want people philosophizing about statecraft or the rights of man. They wanted people who could turn the screw and tighten the screw as it was going down the assembly line, not people who were going to be asking serious questions about serious issues. So they had this convergence of interests, and they decided to work together. You have John Dewey, actual communist, the Rockefellers, supposedly super capitalists, teaming up to build this system. Now, Dewey understood that it would have to be a gradual process. They couldn't just come out in the open and say what they were doing. One of the things he said in an essay that he published at the very end of the 1800s These changes must come gradually. If we force them unduly, it's going to compromise its final success by favoring a violent reaction. So they understood that these would have to be done through a series of very gradual changes to get us to the point where we're at now. But that was always the goal, right? They wanted to instill a new religion in our children. They wanted to instill a new worldview, a new political idea. Get rid of the old idea that God gave us rights and that the government should protect those rights. They wanted a new idea where there was no God or you were God, and you basically get enough education to turn the screw at the factory. We've got to expose this, because until we understand where the system came from, we will keep getting it wrong when it comes to fixing this critical existential threat.
Yeah, we sure will. Alex, I'm curious to know, we never really get to talk much about you and your background. Have you always been sort of aware of what's been going on here at a ground level, or did you yourself also sort of wake up from the trance of the mainstream cult?
It's funny you asked that, Allison. I was educated overseas. I left the country when I was 4, and so I went to mostly international schools, a French school, international school, mostly in Latin America, then in Europe, and then I got kicked out of school in 10th grade. I think the indoctrination was really, really heavy, even heavier probably on the globalist side and the technocratic side than what children in American government indoctrination centers would get. But they gave me the tools to think. I learned reason. I learned logic. I learned some real history. I learned how to read, right? Which unfortunately, most of our young people today are not learning how to read. They're being turned into reading handicaps. And so I had those tools with me. Now, thankfully, I didn't pay a lot of attention in school. I got myself kicked out. I never went back. And I think that in a way served me really well. And, I'm not encouraging people to rebel in school and whatever, but I think not paying attention in school and then educating myself later on my own actually paid enormous dividends. And so I'm thankful for the way God steered my life even before I knew him.
Wow, that's incredible, Alex. I love to hear that. I think I can kind of relate to you on that note, because I also didn't really pay too much attention in school, and I'm grateful for it now because I've been able to formulate my own thoughts and opinions on things, which is not something everyone can say given the overwhelming indoctrination that most kids experience, as you are discussing. Alex, were you surprised to discover anything in particular when you were conducting all of your research around this topic? I suppose everything is truly unshockingly shocking in this day and age, but what was the main takeaway that you gathered from your research?
Well, I would say the most shocking thing to me, Allison, is how open they are now and how diabolical this is. You would expect people doing these types of things to children to do it in smoky rooms where nobody can find out what they're doing. And yet these people wrote essays about what they were doing. These people openly talked about what they were doing. And I'll give you a really clear example that I shared with Alex Jones as well. And I think it's just a small piece of the puzzle, but I think it'll show you what the bigger picture really is here. So you've got the UN now. They're playing a huge role in education around the world. They've got what they call a World Core Curriculum. The guy who wrote it was the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations. His name was Robert Mueller, almost universally known as the father of global education. And in the teacher's manual for this World Core Curriculum that he says should be taught in every school to every child on the planet, he says that it's based on the teachings of Alice Bailey and the Tibetan teacher Djwhal Khul. And I think it's very easy for teachers in America or in Europe or in Japan to just read right over that and think, whatever. When you stop and actually look this up, it will blow your mind. Alice Bailey was the founder of the Lucifer Publishing Company, and this alleged Tibetan teacher was a spiritual entity she can't claim to be communicating with. So when the UN leader in charge of global education is telling us that his education is based on the teachings of the founder of the Lucifer Publishing Company, we ought to be paying very serious attention, especially when our children are going to be subjected to this madness.
Yeah, I would say so. I was just going to ask you, my next question was going to be, who do you think needs to read this book the most? But I think you answered the question. Everyone needs to read this book. Am I right?
Everybody's future is on the line here. And so I'd say most urgently, parents, you must get this information. You must get this information because you must protect your children. It is your duty as a parent to protect your children from the wickedness that now pervades this system. But if you're just concerned about the future, even if you don't have children or you have grandchildren or great-grandchildren, all of it, I mean, everything, the future of your country, the future of your church, the future of your community, the future of your liberties, all of it is on the line here. So I would really encourage people to get themselves educated on these key issues. It's the one thing that touches everyone, and it's the one thing where if we get it wrong, there will be no way to recover absent divine intervention.
That's absolutely right, Alex. I had the pleasure of actually getting a sneak peek of the book early, and I have to say it is fantastic. So I highly encourage everyone to go out, purchase it, read it. Even if you don't have kids, as you mentioned, it is so critical. Alex, before we're out of time today, I know you've had some pretty big endorsements on the book, Indoctrinating Our Children to Death. Can you tell us a little bit about who has endorsed the book?
Well, thank you, Alison. And you were so kind to write an endorsement for us. We really, really appreciate that. A lot of the greatest living Americans today have supported the book publicly. Kirk Cameron, General Michael Flynn, Alex Jones, Dr. Peter McCullough, a lot of the big leaders in education. In fact, the lady who wrote the foreword, the Honorable Diane Douglas, was the former superintendent of all the public schools for the state of Arizona. So we've got some really great Americans who are publicly supporting the book. The co-founder of Moms for Liberty, Tina Descovich. We're very grateful for all of them. Pete Hegseth, co-host of Fox and Friends. And, the reason, it's not that all of them agree with every single thing that I have to say, but I think the reason they're lining up behind the book is because they recognize this is an existential threat to all of us, and we've got to get this right, at least on the basics.
It is indeed. Alex, thank you so much for all of the incredible work that you've done to expose this. Thank you for letting the people know where we need to shift our priorities and our focus onto. And thank you always for joining us. It's a pleasure speaking with you.
It's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much, Alison.
Take care.
For all our viewers asking where One America News is heading in the future, we would like to introduce you to OAN Live. OAN Live is the best way to stay up to date on all of the hard-hitting, straight-shooting, national and international headlines. And the best part is, OAN Live is only $4.99 per month. All the credible, honest, unbiased reporting One America News offers at a fraction of the cost of cable. Just go to OANN.com to easily sign up for OAN Live and stay informed.